So, China is definitely trying to expand its influence, not just in the Solomon Islands, but in all of the Pacific Island nations. Do you think, sort of all eyes are on the Solomon Islands? Like, what happens there will determine what happens in these other Pacific Island nations, whether China will rule or not?
Um, when when we have when I met with some of the people outside, especially Australia and others, where we have discussion, I've mentioned to them before the security deal. I say China actually finally find somebody of its match in the Pacific, and that's Sogavare. And that's what I see that is coming through. So it depends on the leadership of these countries. If you have weak leaders and how the society put their leaders together, that's the I think for me that's the key thing. If you have a society that made its decision to have good leaders, that leaders that are transparent, leaders that ensure that people know what's going on, then it would be quite challenging, even if China has money to play around with. So it's for me, it's about that leadership aspect. If other Pacific Island countries would, through the selection of the people in terms of election and all that, have good leaders who are able to ensure what is happening on their turf are things that are good for the people, and of course their relationship with other donors. So I think it's time for other donors to see how could this be supported rather than keeping on with what has happened and ended up what is now happening in the Solomons, like allowing the democratic institutions within country, in this case Solomon Islands, to it's there, but the people that transacted those principles and those things are not being well informed, and so they just thought that this is another scheme of arrangement we can participate and get what is out of it, not knowing that this is about their lives, this is about their place, this is about who they are. So I think those discussions, in my view, in other parts of the Pacific, if their populations, their people are able to have that mature discussion within their countries and have able to elect people that stands with what they think is best for their countries, the expansion of Chinese would be quite challenging even for the Chinese. I think they believe in money and abusing people and capturing the elites of these countries. In the case of Solomon Islands, their methods of doing things, if it's known by the leaders and good leaders within the region, it could be helpful to at least I think if we have to relate, we have to relate on this stuff, not on what the Chinese would like them to do with what is happening in the Solomons. That's a view I developed based on the history of Sogovare and how he aspired for power in the power structure of the Solomon Islands system. And also, I've heard this when I was when I was at the Prime Minister's office, that there are advisors within the Prime Minister's office that advocate from some level of a dictatorship, and they were looking to Fiji as an example because of our difficulties in developing our country, because of the diversity we have and all those things. There is this thinking that some of the advisors within the Prime Minister's office that were advocating that I think we need to have a dictator like Bainimarama who dictated good things, and I think so. Those conversations, while yes, they are this conversation, but it happens within a within an office that is very important for Solomon Islands, in this case, the Prime Minister's office. So maybe those are the conversations that culminated into what is happening. Um, and if you look at the behavior of Sogovar in terms of how it aspired to get power in the various times in his political career, especially at the prime minister's level, it's very obvious that you can see evidently that he has the character of wanting to hold on to that space, and if there is anything that make him to be there for a longer time, it would not be difficult to see that he would aspire for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're the type of person who thinks that a benevolent dictatorship is a good idea, then of course looking to the Chinese Communist Party, you would have, stars in your eyes, right? Look at all the development that this authoritarian regime has been able to do. And
If your leader wants to be a benevolent dictator, but they're looking to communist China, they're probably not the benevolent dictator you're looking for.
That's the problem. It's not a benevolent dictatorship, right? But I think even in the West, we've seen that argument that, the Chinese Communist Party, well, sure, they're authoritarian, but they can build cities and high-speed railways and all of this, infrastructure development, right?
Yeah.
So
billionaires
if I make a comment at that point, when Suidani decided that Malaita Province stand and said, look, we have to have a proper discussion about this, they were invited, the provincial leaders were invited by the Prime Minister's office through the Ministry of Provincial Government Institutional Strengthening. And that is exactly what they were presented with. The high-rising buildings that were built by China in Fiji, in Samoa, in other places. So it's like that's the playbook of the Chinese. And, having that picture in front of leaders in the Solomon Islands who have very little knowledge about the complexity of how the Chinese government operate, they will attracted to that one dimension only. The good pictures, these things, rather than going beyond that and seeing how this thing all come about, what aspects of society we need to be careful about. That picture has not been presented to them. So it's a one-sided story, one-sided story already in the case of Solomon Islands, that the presentation happened exactly like you said. It's about the high-rising buildings, about this and that, other than the reality of a system, how it operates within different aspects of a society.
Yeah, it seems so strange to me. Like, what's the point of a high-rise building? Like, what's it going to be filled with if the fundamentals of the economy in the region are not good? Then it's just an empty shell.
It is. The Premier and I, we were in Vanuatu, I think it was 2020. There was a conference center that was abandoned which is too expensive to be run by any local, and it ended up being given back to the Chinese nationals to run. So that's exactly what, like the point that you raised. Okay, we can have these concrete buildings and whatnot, flashy things, but what's the use of having them whilst we are still suffering economically, and our health systems are not working and all that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show and talking to us. What's happening in the Solomon Islands is incredibly important. It really will have a big global impact, and it's difficult to get good information out of there. So I appreciate you coming on and telling us directly what's going on there.
Well, it's my sincere appreciation as well to able to be allowed to talk on this platform, which is, like you rightly said, it will be very useful to reach out to other Solomon Islanders within the country, share their views other than the views of the government that seems to be a government that seems to be secretive about issues that affect lives of ordinary people and even the region and now in the world. Before I let you go, the Malaita provincial government, especially the Premier and myself and others, we actually physically go around in the province and talk with people. And for the last 39 or 40 years, this is the first time for any Premier to undertake such a program, to go and visit people within their villages and talk to them about these issues, complex issues, but at least to relate to them in some ways that is useful for them to understand. So I think this is, if donor families want to see the communities of Solomon Islands, for that matter, are supported in this kind of undertaking, it would be useful to have the conversation with them to ensure people understand what's going on, people understand what the system is there, how do they relate to, and how do they ensure it brings to them what they want, other than just participating in a black hole sort of thing. So thank you again for having me, and it's being very kind of you to reach out to me and have this conversation.
And take care. You and Suidani are definitely making some powerful enemies out there.
Definitely. Thanks.
I kind of can't believe the last thing that Celsus was saying about how they literally brought the provincial leaders to Honoraria and showed them, all the great, high rises that the Chinese regime was building in Fiji and these other places, and be like, don't we want some of that action too?
And in the end, it's just a hollow erection. What?
Nothing.
Yeah, they erected the buildings that are not useful. Is what he means.
They're abandoned. Okay, but it's something that Sogavari has in common with Wall Street bankers, right? This kind of like, oh yeah, isn't this great?
The investment. Well, I mean, like billionaires like Michael Bloomberg, even Elon Musk, they're always like, oh, look at China's investments,
China's
infrastructure,
development. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when the Chinese Communist Party is obsessed with GDP as a measure of success. And the problem with this is that it encourages exactly this kind of hollow infrastructure building because that's what GDP is made from.
Well, I mean, GDP is also made from testing like 1.4 billion people for COVID a million times. All of
right,
this.
but like all this stuff. But
it doesn't enrich the lives of actual people.
Right. It doesn't enrich individuals' lives necessarily. And it doesn't empower them in a way. Like it's not like the Chinese Communist Party feels that it's successful if it has done a good job of consulting people on the ground about what works for them in their lives.
They say they do all the time. But yeah,
that's true. What the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference is all about.
It's all about consultative democracy.
Right.
So it's actually interesting because Xi Jinping a couple weeks ago announced a new infrastructure program.
Right. Like that's what China needs right now. It's more infrastructure.
I mean, they had so much infrastructure building that they had to, this is what the Belt and Road is. They were basically exporting their excess infrastructure building capabilities, right?
Right, like the extra machinery, the extra steel and concrete, the extra labor force with all these extra men because so many women have been aborted over the last generation.
You run out of things to build in China, and so now you're going to send them to the Solomon Islands and Africa and all these other places to build, and so these state-run companies can make money and grow China's GDP.
Surely that will never reach a dead end.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it was kind of funny to see that, now they're talking about infrastructure within China too, because now the economy is like, it's in bad shape.
Well, right yeah, we did a whole episode about how the Belt and Road is collapsing.
Yeah, not just that, but also internally in China because of the zero COVID policy, all the lockdowns and things like that. So they're kind of going back to that infrastructure playbook again. And interestingly, Matt, what you were talking about the empowerment thing, when Celsus was talking about how they want to do things in Malaita Province, like go back to the tribes and have people like actually talk to the people and have them decide what to do and economically empower that tribal system. I was thinking about what the Chinese Communist Party does in places like Tibet, where, right, it's like a traditional, like these people are nomads. They have this like herding, like they're herders. They move with their flocks. And so what does the Chinese Communist Party do in order to lift these people out of poverty, right? They, take them, like they're like, okay, you're not going to be a herder anymore. You're going to go work in a factory. And we're going to take you from the land that you've been on for hundreds of years, and we're going to put you in these high-rise apartment buildings. Because that's progress. That's development.
Well, yeah, if your whole GDP is based on like this infrastructure development, like there is no room for herders or tribe. Worker drones, though. You can really use some worker drones.
You mean people in the factories?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like literal drones, since we are talking about like a place where they...
Yeah, but you need worker drone factories to build the drones that then do the jobs to replace the people's jobs. Anyway, it's not going to turn out well.
No. Well, yeah, I am encouraged to see both the Trump and Biden administration have made efforts to get the U.S. back in the Pacific, back with the Pacific Island nations. And so hopefully it's not too late to turn the tide.